Captain Jake Morrison had served 12 years in the Terran Defense Corps, and he had seen things that would break most men. He had survived 3 interstellar wars, lost friends on burning ships, and earned a reputation as someone who could do the impossible. When Admiral Patricia Lane summoned him to the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442b, he expected another combat mission. He expected explosions and gunfire and the familiar taste of adrenaline on his tongue. He did not expect the princess. Her name was Valera Shanti, third daughter of the Etheri High Emperor, and she stood barely 5 feet tall, with luminescent silver skin that seemed to glow softly in the station lights. Her eyes were large and violet, holding depths that reminded Jake of nebulae he had seen during deep space patrols. She moved with a grace that made human dancers look clumsy, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that no human throat could produce. The Etheri were an ancient race, far older than humanity. Their technology could bend space and time in ways human scientists barely understood. Their ships crossed the galaxy in weeks, while human vessels took months. Their medical science had conquered death itself for those wealthy enough to afford the treatments. Their weapons could crack planets and ignite stars, but they have never known war. Not truly. For 10,000 years, the Etheri had expanded peacefully through a quiet corner of the universe. They met primitive species that worshipped them as gods or empty worlds that they terraformed into paradises. They developed art and philosophy and music that made grown humans weep with its beauty. They had no soldiers, no warriors, no armies. Violence was something they read about in historical texts, an aberration committed by lesser beings who had not yet evolved past their animal instincts. Then, they met the Vraxel. Jake had read the intelligence reports. The Vraxel were conquerors in the truest sense of the word. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They consumed. Every species they encountered faced the same choice: submit and become slaves, or resist and become extinct. They had been spreading through the galaxy for centuries, leaving dead worlds and broken civilizations in their wake. The Etheri had never faced anything like them when the first Vraxel warships appeared in Etheri space. The Emperor had sent diplomats. The diplomats never returned. He sent gifts of technology and art. The Vraxel burned them. He sent messages of peace and brotherhood. The Vraxel responded by destroying 3 colony worlds and harvesting the populations for food in desperation. The Etheri Empire reached out to the one species in the known galaxy with a reputation for impossible violence. A species that other races whispered about in fear. A species that had clawed its way up from a harsh world and refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them. Humanity. Jake stood at attention in Admiral Lane's office, his scarred face betraying nothing as she explained the situation. The Admiral was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. She had commanded the defense of Mars during the Centauri conflict and survived the massacre at Titan Station. Jake respected her more than almost anyone he had ever met. "You want me to babysit?" he said flatly. "I want you to keep her alive," Admiral Lane replied, her voice hard. "The Vraxel have placed a bounty on every member of the Etheri royal family. Princess Valera is here to negotiate a formal alliance between our peoples. If she dies, that alliance dies with her, and without Etheri technology backing our fleets, we don't stand a chance when the Vraxel eventually turn their attention to human space. When, not if. When, they're coming for everyone eventually. The only question is whether we'll be ready when they arrive." Jake looked through the observation window at the princess. She was examining a human coffee mug with the curiosity of a child discovering something wonderful for the first time. Her slender fingers traced the handle, her violet eyes wide with fascination at such a simple object. A aide stood nearby, trying to explain the concept of caffeine addiction, and Valera laughed with delight at the absurdity of it. "She has no idea what's coming." "Does she?" Jake said quietly. "No," the Admiral replied. She doesn't. The Etheri have never had to develop instincts for danger. They don't understand threats the way we do to them. The universe has always been a safe place full of wonders to explore. They can't conceive of beings who would hurt them for profit or pleasure, or simple cruelty. That makes her vulnerable. That makes her your responsibility. You'll have a team of 12. All veterans, all volunteers. Your mission is simple. Keep the princes alive until the alliance is signed. Whatever it takes. Jake was silent for a long moment, watching Valera through the glass. She had moved on from the coffee mug and was now delighting in the novelty of a ballpoint pen. Clicking it repeatedly and giggling at the mechanism, she looked so innocent, so completely unaware of the darkness that surrounded her. Whatever it takes, he repeated. Whatever it takes. Dismissed, Captain. Jake found the princess an hour later in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars with an expression of pure wonder. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and her face lit up with a smile that held no suspicion, no wariness, no fear. You must be my human guardian, she said in flawless English. I am Valera. It is wonderful to meet you, Captain Jake Morrison, Princess. I'll be handling your security during your stay. Security? Valera tilted her head. The gesture almost bird-like, my father insisted. Though I cannot imagine what dangers exist on such a peaceful station. Everyone here has been so kind. Jake studied her face, looking for any sign that she understood the gravity of her situation. He found none. She genuinely believed the universe was full of kind people who wished her well. She had no concept of assassins or bounty hunters or the lengths that desperate beings would go to for money or power. Princess, do you understand why your father sent you here with guards? He worries, Valera said with a fond smile. All fathers worry about their daughters. I have told him many times that I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. But he insists on these precautions. I think it makes him feel better. And do you feel safe? Of course. Why would I not? Jake almost laughed. It was not a happy sound. This was his mission now. This fragile, innocent creature who had no idea that half the galaxy wanted her dead. This princess who thought security was a father's unnecessary worry rather than the only thing standing between her and a violent end. Princess, he said carefully, I need you to understand something. From this moment on, you do exactly what I say when I say it. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to stay behind me and not make a sound, you do it without question. Can you do that? Valera blinked at him, confused by his intensity. You are very serious for someone in such a safe place. Can you do that? Princess, something in his voice made her pause for the first time. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her silver features. Yes, I suppose I can. Though I still think you are worrying over nothing. Jake nodded and took his position by the door, his hand resting casually near his weapon. He had protected diplomats before. He had guarded generals and scientists and politicians. But he had never guarded someone so completely unaware of the dangers that surrounded her. He hoped she would never have to learn, but deep in his gut, in the place where soldiers kept their darkest instincts, he knew that hope was futile. A storm was coming. And when it arrived, Princess Valera, Sean, Thee would learn exactly what humans were capable of. She would learn why the Raxel feared them. She would learn why her father had begged for their help, and Jake Morrison would make sure she survived the lesson. 3 days into his assignment, Jake had learned several things about Princess Valera. She was brilliant in ways that made human geniuses look slow. Fluent in 17 languages, including flawless English that she had learned in just 2 weeks. She was kind beyond measure, stopping to speak with every crew member she met, remembering their names, asking about their families and their dreams. She had a gift for making people feel important, feel seen, feel valued, and she was utterly hopelessly naive about the nature of danger. "Why do you carry so many weapons?" she asked him one evening as they walked through the station corridors. Her violet eyes studied the pistol on his hip, the knife on his belt, the compact rifle slung across his back, the various hidden blades and backup weapons concealed throughout his uniform. "Because I might need them. But we are on a protected station. There are security protocols, emergency systems. Surely you do not expect trouble here." Jake did not answer. He had learned in just 3 days that explaining human paranoia to the ethery was like explaining colors to someone born blind. They simply could not conceive of a universe where someone might want to hurt them for no reason. Their minds did not work that way. Valera had never seen violence. Her people had art depicting ancient conflicts, historical records of primitive struggles from before they achieved enlightenment. But for 10,000 years, no ethery had raised a hand against another. The very concept was almost physically impossible for them to grasp. "You humans are such fascinating creatures," Valera continued, seemingly unbothered by his silence. "You prepare for disasters that may never come. You imagine threats that do not exist. You carry weapons on peaceful stations. It must be exhausting, living with such fear." "It is not fear." "Princess, then what is it?" Jake paused at a junction, his eyes automatically scanning the corridors, checking the shadows, noting the positions of the security cameras. "It is experience. My species learned long ago that the universe does not care about our safety. If we want to survive, we have to be ready for anything." "How sad," Valera said softly. "To live always expecting the worst." "How sad," Jake replied. "To live never expecting anything at all." The attack came at 0347 station time. Jake was awake instantly. Years of combat conditioning pulling him from sleep before the first alarm even finished sounding. His body moved on pure instinct, grabbing his rifle, checking the ammunition, running through the connecting door to Valera's quarters. In 3 seconds flat, he found her sitting up in bed, her silver skin pale with confusion, her violet eyes wide with something she had never experienced before. "Fear. What is happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Stay behind me." The door to her quarters exploded inward, torn from its frame by a breaching charge. 3 figures in black tactical gear poured through the opening, weapons raised, moving with the practiced efficiency of professional killers. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, but Jake could see enough. They were human mercenaries. He realized in the fraction of a second before combat began. Hired by the Vraxel, because even those monsters knew better than to send their own soldiers against human protection. They had paid traitors to do their dirty work. Humans who had sold their souls for alien gold. Jake had expected aliens. He had prepared for aliens. He had spent hours studying Vraxel combat tactics and physical weaknesses. He was almost disappointed. The first attacker died before he fully cleared the doorway, Jake's rifle putting 2 rounds through his faceplate with mechanical precision. The body had not yet hit the ground when Jake was already moving, already shifting his aim to the second target. The second mercenary managed to fire once, the shot going wide as Jake closed the distance. His rifle came up to block a strike, then his knife was in his hand, finding the gap between armor plates with the ease of long practice. The man gasped once and collapsed. The third mercenary tried to run. Perhaps he had seen enough. Perhaps he had realized that this was not the easy job he had been promised. Perhaps some small part of him had remembered what it meant to be human and felt. Shame. Jake did not care about his reasons. He cared about the princes behind him. He cared about his mission. The third mercenary made it 5 steps before Jake's throw put a blade through the back of his neck. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant wail of alarms and the soft drip of blood pooling on polished metal. Jake stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, his body still humming with combat awareness. checking for additional threats. Finding none, then he heard the sound behind him. Valera had pressed herself into the corner of her room, her slender body trembling, her violet eyes fixed on the bodies that had been living men just seconds ago. Her silver skin had gone almost white, and her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. "You killed them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You just killed them." Jake ejected his spent magazine and slammed in a fresh one with practiced efficiency. His hands were steady. His heart rate was already slowing. This was familiar territory for him, comfortable in a way that civilians could never understand. Yes, how can you do that? How can you just end someone? They were alive. They had thoughts and dreams and people who loved them, and now they are nothing. How can you do that and stand there so calm? Jake turned to look at her. Really look at her, and for the first time, he let her see what lived behind his eyes. He let her see the wars he had fought, the friends he had buried, the nights he had spent screaming into his pillow because the faces of the dead would not leave him alone. He let her see the cost of being what he was, because someone has to. "Princess, because if I do not, they would have killed you. And I made a promise to keep you alive. But the violence, the death, does it not bother you? It destroys me," Jake said quietly. "Every single time, I remember every face, every name, every life I have taken. They haunt my dreams and poison my quiet moments. I will never escape what I have done." Valera stared at him, tears forming in her alien eyes. "Then why do you do it? Why do you keep fighting if it causes you such pain?" Jake walked to her slowly, his weapons lowered, his posture as non-threatening as he could make it. He knelt before her so their eyes were level, so she could see the truth in his scarred face. "Because the universe is dark. Princess, it is full of creatures who would hurt the innocent for profit or pleasure. Someone has to stand between them and the people they would harm. Someone has to be willing to pay the price that peace demands. That is what humans do. That is what I do. It is a terrible burden. Yes, but it is mine to carry, not yours." He stood and offered her his hand. She took it after a moment's hesitation, her silver fingers cold against his calloused palm. He helped her to her feet and guided her away from the bodies, away from the blood, away from the first violence she had ever witnessed. "This will happen again," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, and you will protect me. With my life." Valera looked at him with those galaxy-deep eyes, and Jake saw something new in them. Something that had not been there before the attack, a tiny seed of understanding, a beginning awareness of what the universe truly was. "I asked you to guard me," she said softly. "I did not know what I was asking for." "No," Jake agreed, leading her to safety as his team secured the corridor outside. "But now you are beginning to learn." In the weeks that followed the attack, Princess Valera began to study her human guardian with the same intensity she had once applied to diplomatic negotiations and interstellar politics. She watched him train for hours each morning, brutal exercises that would have hospitalized an ethery within minutes. She observed his eating habits, noting how he always sat facing the door, how he never drank anything he had not watched being poured, how he tested every piece of food before taking a bite. She learned that he slept only 4 hours a night, and even then never deeply. The slightest sound would have him on his feet with a weapon in his hand before his eyes were fully open. "You never relax," she observed one afternoon as they sat in the station's secure lounge. Jake occupied his usual position by the door while Valera worked on diplomatic correspondence. Even when you were sitting still, you were watching everything, calculating distances and angles, planning escape routes and attack vectors. Your mind never stops. "Old habits," Jake replied without taking his eyes off the corridor outside. "The ethery have a word for beings like you," Valera said thoughtfully. "Kethvari, it means one who walks with death." We use it in old stories to describe monsters, ancient creatures of nightmare who could not be bargained with or reasoned with, who existed only to destroy. Jake almost smiled at that. It was not a happy expression. Sounds about right, but you are not a monster, Valera continued, her voice soft with realization. I have seen real monsters now. The Vraxel delegation that came to our homeworld before the war began. I was not supposed to be there, but I hid and watched through a gap in the doorway. She paused, her silver skin paling at the memory. They smiled while they described what they would do to our children. They laughed when my father begged for peace. Their eyes held nothing but hunger and cruelty. That is what monsters look like. That is what evil truly is. She looked at Jake with those violet eyes that had seen too much innocence shattered. You do not smile when you kill. You do not enjoy the violence. It wounds you every time. I can see it now. The pain you carry. The weight of every life you have taken. You are not a monster, Jake. You are something else entirely. What am I then? Princess. Valera thought for a long moment before answering. You are a guardian. A protector who has chosen to bear a terrible burden so that others do not have to. You stand in the darkness and fight the monsters so that beings like me can live in the light. It is a sacrifice I never understood until now. Jake was silent. His scarred face showed nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Something almost like surprise at being understood. Can I ask you a question? Valera said, You can ask, why do humans fight? Why did your species develop this capacity for violence when so many others in the galaxy did not? The Etheri evolved for cooperation and harmony. The Vraxel evolved for conquest and consumption. But humans seem different. You can be incredibly gentle and incredibly savage, often at the same time. Where does that come from? Jake was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars visible through the viewport when he finally spoke. His voice carried the weight of human history. Earth was not kind to us. Our world had predators that wanted to eat us, diseases that killed entire populations. Natural disasters that could destroy everything we built in seconds. We faced ice ages and famines and droughts that lasted decades. We had to fight for every meal, every shelter, every moment of peace. That sounds terrible. It was. But it also made us strong. We learned to work together, to build tools, to plan ahead, to never give up no matter how hopeless things seemed. And then we started fighting each other. Valera leaned forward, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. For thousands of years, humans have been killing humans, Jake continued. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things so trivial that we cannot even remember them now. We got very, very good at destruction. We developed weapons that could level cities in seconds, poisons that could kill millions. Machines designed for nothing but killing. That is horrifying. Yes. But it also means we understand something your people never had to learn. We know what it means to be prey. We know the terror of being hunted by something stronger and faster and crueler than ourselves. We know the desperation of fighting for survival against impossible odds. And we know that sometimes the only way to protect the things we love is to become the very thing we fear. You became predators. We became whatever we needed to be. That is the human way. We adapt. We overcome. We refuse to accept defeat even when all hope seems lost. It is not always pretty. It is not always noble. But it keeps us alive. Valera considered his words carefully. Her entire worldview was shifting, adjusting to accommodate truths she had never imagined. The Vraxel think humans are primitive, she said finally. They call you the mad apes and mock your technology. They think you are just another weak species to be conquered. I know, but they are afraid of you. I saw it in the delegation's eyes when they spoke about humans. Behind the contempt, there was fear, real fear. The kind my people do not even have a word for. They should be afraid. Why, your ships are slower than theirs. Your weapons are less powerful. Your numbers are smaller. By every measure, they are superior. Jake turned to look at her then, and Valera saw something ancient in his eyes. Something that had burned in human hearts since the first cave dweller picked up a stone and decided that nothing would ever threaten his family again. It was not madness. It was not cruelty. It was determination. Pure and absolute and utterly unbreakable princess. The Vraxil have conquered species for millennia. They have never lost a war. They have never faced an enemy they could not crush with overwhelming force. They think they understand violence. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. They have no idea what is coming for them. They have never fought an enemy who would rather die than surrender. They have never faced soldiers who will keep attacking with broken bones and missing limbs. They have never experienced the fury of humans protecting something they love. What will happen when your fleets finally meet? Jake smiled then, and it was the most terrifying expression Valera had ever seen on a human face. There was no malice in it, no cruelty, no enjoyment of the violence to come. There was only certainty. We will teach them what fear really means. Valera should have been disturbed by his words, by the promise of slaughter they contained. But instead, she felt something she had not experienced since the attack on her quarters. She felt safe. For the first time in weeks, she truly believed that she would survive this nightmare. Not because the universe had become less dangerous, but because she finally understood what stood between her and the darkness, a human guardian who would walk through hell itself before letting any harm come to her. Thank you, Jake, she said quietly. For what, princess? For showing me the truth. Even though it was painful to learn, Jake nodded once and returned his attention to the corridor outside. Always watching, always protecting, Valera returned to her correspondence with new words forming in her mind. Words that would convince her father and the Aethery Council that this alliance was not just necessary but essential. Humanity was not the primitive species the galaxy believed them to be. They were something far more valuable. They were hope. The Vraxil came in force on the 42nd day. 3 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace without warning, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could tear through the station's defenses like paper. Within seconds, they had deployed jamming fields that cut all communications. No distress signals could reach the Terran fleet. No calls for help could pierce the electronic wall surrounding Harmony Station. The station's defenses had been designed more for show than actual combat. They fell within minutes under the concentrated fire of Vraxil weapons. Shields collapsed, automated turrets went silent, and the outer hull began to buckle under the assault. Then the boarding pods launched 200. Vraxil soldiers breached the station at 7 different points, pouring through the torn metal like a flood of death. They were massive creatures, 8 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that could stop most small arms' fire, and their eyes burned with the cold hunger of a species that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Their orders were simple. Kill the Aethery Princess. Destroy any hope of an alliance between humanity and the Aethery Empire. Send a message to the galaxy about what happened. To those who opposed Vraxil dominance, they expected to find cowering diplomats and perhaps a handful of security guards. They did not account for Jake Morrison. They did not account for the 12 other human soldiers stationed on Harmony. Jake had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every spare hour had been devoted to studying the station's layout, memorizing every corridor, every maintenance shaft, every blind spot in the security coverage. He knew where the lights could be cut, where ambush could be staged, where choke points would turn superior numbers into a liability. His team had prepared with the same obsessive attention to detail. They had positioned supplies throughout the diplomatic wing, hidden weapons caches in locations only they knew about, rigged entire sections with improvised explosives that could be triggered at a moment's notice. When the first Vraxel squad burst into the diplomatic wing, they found not panicking civilians, but a killing field. Jake's opening shot took the lead Vraxel through the eye, one of the few vulnerable points in their armored bodies. Before the creature had finished falling, his team opened up from concealed positions, overlapping fields of fire that turned the corridor into a death trap. The entire squad died without managing a single return shot. The second squad pushed forward more carefully, learning from the fate of their comrades. They used portable shields, advanced in proper formation, checked corners before rounding them. They walked directly into a trap Jake had prepared 3 weeks earlier. The service corridor they chose as an alternate route had been rigged with homemade explosives packed with metal fragments. When the detonation ripped through their ranks, the survivors stumbled into waiting gunfire from positions they never saw. Not one of them made it out alive. The third squad retreated to regroup and call for reinforcements. Jake let them come for 6 hours. 13 humans held off 200 Vraxel soldiers in a battle that would become legend among both species. They fought with guns and knives and bare hands when ammunition ran low. They improvised explosives from station supplies, turning cleaning chemicals into weapons of war. They reprogrammed maintenance robots to serve as mobile bombs, sending them rolling into Vraxel formations before triggering detonations that could be heard throughout the station. Every meter of the diplomatic wing became a monument to human ingenuity and human stubbornness. Private Maria Santos held a corridor for 45 minutes with a broken rifle and a combat knife until reinforcements could reach her position. She killed 9 Vraxel before a claw finally caught her shoulder, but even then she kept fighting, switching the knife to her other hand and taking 2 more enemies with her before medics pulled her to safety. Sergeant Kevin O'Brien used his knowledge of the station's power systems to overload conduits whenever Vraxel troops passed beneath them, cooking enemies in their own arm with bursts of superheated plasma. When they learned to avoid the power lines, he started using the fire suppression system to fill corridors with foam that blinded sensors and made footing treacherous. Corporal Linda Chun fought her way through 3 Vraxel checkpoints to rescue a group of Ethori diplomats who had been cut off from the safe zones. She arrived with 2 bullets left in her pistol and walked out leading 15 terrified aliens through enemy territory, killing another 4 Vraxel along the way with weapons she took from the fallen and threw it all. Jake Morrison was everywhere. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, appearing where he was needed most, vanishing before the enemy could pin him down. His rifle claimed lives with mechanical efficiency, each shot carefully aimed to hit vulnerable points. His presence seemed to multiply. With Vraxel soldiers reporting contact in areas he could not possibly have reached so quickly, his uniform was soaked with blood, most of it not his own. His ammunition counter had hit 0 twice, forcing him to claim weapons from fallen enemies and dead comrades alike. His left arm hung useless at his side, broken in 3 places during a hand-to-hand engagement with a Vraxel commander twice his size. He did not stop. He could not stop because somewhere behind him, in a reinforced safe room deep in the diplomatic wing, Princess Valera Shanti was counting on him. She was trusting him to keep his promise, to protect her no matter the cost. Jake Morrison had never broken a promise in his life. He was not about to start now. The Vraxel kept coming, wave after wave, throwing bodies at the human defenses with the confidence of a species that had never lost a war. They expected the humans to tire, to run out of ammunition, to make mistakes that could be exploited instead. The humans seemed to grow stronger with every passing hour. Jake knew they could not hold forever. His people were wounded, exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and willpower. But they only needed to hold long enough. The Terran relief fleet arrived 6 hours and 23 minutes after the attack. began. 3 destroyers dropped out of hyperspace with weapons hot, having pushed their engines past every safety limit to reach the station in time. They tore through the Vraxel jamming field with military-grade countermeasures and immediately engaged the enemy warships. The battle in space was brief and brutal. Human ships lacked the raw power of Vraxel vessels, but their crews fought with a fury that shocked enemies accustomed to easy victories. Within 30 minutes, all 3 Vraxel warships were drifting hulks, their crews dead or dying. The Marines boarded the station 15 minutes later, expecting to find a massacre. Instead, they found a slaughterhouse of a very different kind. 187 dead Vraxel soldiers lay scattered throughout the diplomatic wing. Their bodies filled corridors and choked doorways, evidence of a desperate last stand that had somehow become a victory. Blood painted the walls in abstract patterns of violence. 4 humans had died in the defense. Their bodies had been carefully moved to a side room, laid out with respect and covered with whatever cloth could be found, even in the chaos of battle. Jake had made sure his fallen were treated with honor. The rescue team found him standing guard outside the safe room door, rifle raised, ready to kill anything that came close. His uniform was more red than green now. His face was pale from blood loss. His broken arm had swollen to twice its normal size. His eyes were empty of everything except the will to continue. "It is over." Lieutenant Commander Wendy Price told him gently. "Captain, it is over. You can stand down." Jake looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death to process any more. "The princess," he managed through cracked lips, "safe. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of you." Jake nodded once. A tiny movement that seemed to require enormous effort. Then his legs gave out, and the darkness finally claimed him. The medics rushed forward to catch him before he hit the ground, calling for emergency transport, listing injuries that should have killed him hours ago. But even unconscious, even broken, Jake Morrison's hand remained closed around his weapon, ready to fight, ready to protect, until the very end. Jake woke in a medical bay that smelled of disinfectant and healing compounds. Soft light filtered through windows that looked out on the blue-green curve of Earth. He was home, somehow. Though he had no memory of the journey, his body ached in ways he had not thought possible. Every breath sent pain through his chest where broken ribs were still knitting together. His left arm was encased in a regeneration sleeve, medical nets slowly rebuilding bone and muscle that had been shattered beyond normal repair. But he was alive. He turned his head and found Princess Valera sitting beside his bed. Her silver skin was pale with exhaustion. Her violet eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. She had been crying, perhaps for hours. "You almost died," she said quietly, her voice rough with emotion. "The doctors say it will take months to fully recover. Your arm may never regain full function. Your body sustained damage that would have killed any ethery 10 times over. Acceptable losses. Acceptable." Valera's voice cracked. "Jake, you nearly destroyed yourself protecting me. You and 12 others against 200. 4 of your people did not survive. How can you call that acceptable? How can you speak of their deaths so calmly?" Jake turned to look at her fully, wincing at the movement, because they knew what they were signing up for. Every human on that station understood the risks. They chose to stand and fight anyway, not because they wanted to die, but because they believe some things are worth dying for. And I was worth dying for. A foreign princess from a species you barely know. The alliance was worth dying for. The chance to stop the Vraxel was worth dying for. Jake paused, his voice softening. "And yes, princess, you were worth dying for. You specifically. Not just what you represent, but who you are." Valera stared at him in silence for a long moment. Tears began to slide down her silver cheeks again, but she made no move to wipe them away. "I do not understand you," she whispered. I do not understand any of you. My people have studied humans for decades. We have analyzed your history and your culture and your biology. We thought we understood what you were. Primitive apes who had stumbled upon intelligence. Violent creatures held together by fragile social bonds that could shatter at any moment. And now I have seen what you truly are. I watched 13 of you hold back an army. I saw your wounded keep fighting when they should have been unconscious. I saw your dying use their last breaths to warn their comrades of danger. I saw impossible things, Jake. Things my people never imagined possible. She reached out and took his good hand in both of hers. Her silver fingers were warm against his calloused skin. You are not primitive, she said firmly. You are not simple violent apes. You are something my people have never encountered before. Something the galaxy has never seen. What are we then? You are protectors, guardians, beings who have learned to embrace the darkness so that others can live in the light. Your violence is not savagery. It is sacrifice. Your aggression is not cruelty. It is love turned outward, made sharp enough to cut through any threat. Jake said nothing. There was a lump in his throat that he could not seem to swallow. The alliance will pass, Valera continued, her voice growing stronger. I will make absolutely certain of it. My father was already inclined to support the treaty, but now he will champion it personally. He watched the recordings from the station. He saw what your people did for me. There is not a single member of the Ethori Council who will dare oppose him now. Good. And when our fleets combine with yours, when Ethori technology meets human determination, Valera squeezed his hand tightly. The Vraxel will not know what hit them. They think they are the greatest predators in the galaxy. They have never faced anything like what we will become together. Jake allowed himself a small smile. The first genuine one he had felt in weeks. No, they will not. The formal signing of the Human Ethori Alliance took place 3 months later in a ceremony broadcast to 100 worlds. It was held in the Great Hall of the United Earth Government Building, a structure specifically designed to impress visiting dignitaries with human achievement princes. Valera Shanthi stood beside the Terran president, representing her father and her people. She spoke words of unity and cooperation, of shared purpose and mutual respect, of two species who had found in each other the qualities they themselves lacked behind her. As always, stood Captain Jake Morrison. His arm was still in a sling. New scars marked his face that would never fully fade. But his eyes were clear and watchful, scanning the crowd for threats, ready to act at the first sign of danger. Some habits would never change when the ceremony ended and the dignitaries began to mingle. Valera turned to face her guardian. You never actually answered my first question. Jake raised an eyebrow. What question was that? When we first met, I asked if you could guard me. You never gave me a direct answer. Jake considered this for a moment. I suppose I thought the answer was obvious. It was not. Not to me. I did not understand what I was asking for. I thought protection meant standing near me and looking intimidating. I did not realize it meant being willing to die, being willing to kill, being willing to sacrifice everything for someone you barely knew. And now I understand, Valera smiled. And there was something fierce in the expression, something that had not been there before the station, something almost human. You were not just asking if I needed protection. You were asking if I was ready to see what humans really are. If I could handle the truth of your nature. Were you ready? Valera looked out at the gathered crowds. Humans and Ethori mingling together. Two species who had almost nothing in common, except a shared enemy and a fragile hope for the future. Somewhere out there, the Vraxel were regrouping, planning their next attack, confident that nothing could stop their conquest of the galaxy. They had no idea what was coming. I think, Valera said slowly, that I am grateful that when the darkness came, when the monsters arrived at our door, there were bigger monsters waiting to meet them. Monsters who chose to protect instead of destroy. Monsters who remembered what it meant to care for something beyond themselves. She turned back to Jake, her violet eyes shining with newfound understanding. You are terrible and beautiful creatures. You humans, you carry such capacity for violence, such potential for destruction, but you also carry something my people lost long ago. Or perhaps never had at all. You carry the will to stand against the night, no matter how dark it becomes. Jake said nothing. There were no words for what he felt in that moment. Can you guard me? Human, Valera asked softly, echoing the question she had first posed months ago, a lifetime ago. Can you protect my people, my world? Everything I love. Jake Morrison looked at the princess, who had become more than just an assignment. The fragile being who had taught him that there was still something worth fighting for beyond duty and obligation. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the sacrifices they had made, of the legacy they had left behind. Yes, he said simply. Icon Valera nodded once, satisfied with an answer that was worth more than all the treaties and ceremonies in the galaxy. The future was uncertain. The war with the Vraxel would be long and bloody. Many more would die before it was over. Species entire might fall into darkness, but humanity would be there, standing guard. Ready to fight, ready to protect, because that was what humans did. That was what humans were, guardians of the light. Forged in the darkness, and the galaxy would never be the same again.